And joining us now in studio, Francis Lankin and Munir Sheikh. Together they are the Commission for the Review of Social Assistance in Ontario. And it's nice to have you both in our studio today.
Thank you very much.
Let's just take 30 seconds off the top and remind everybody who you two are, because we got a lot of new Canadians who watch this program and they may not know. Francis, NDP Cabinet Minister in the Bob Rae government.
I was.
Headed up the United Way of Greater Toronto for how many years?
11 years.
11 years there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And Munir Sheikh, we may remember you because you resigned on a point of principle from Statistics Canada when you didn't like what the federal government was doing on the long-form census. I got that right?
Approximately.
Approximately. All right. Close enough for journalism, eh?
Yes.
And now you two are the Commission. It's just the two of you. Francis, some background first. How did this review come about that you're into right now?
Well, the province committed to it as part of the poverty reduction strategy, and it's a really important contextual piece for us in the work that we're doing. As they, looked at trying to reduce child poverty and trying to make changes in education, they also knew that there was this group of Ontarians who, for whatever reason, at a point in time are unable to work, or perhaps longer term with a disability unable to work, and who, are currently living in poverty. And so part of understanding how to better help those people transition to employment if they can, to lift themselves out of poverty, to build a better future, or to live on social assistance without all of the kind of negative consequences of the low incomes that people currently have, they asked for a review. It's not just as simple as raising rates. There's a lot of issues that need to be addressed. So that's how it came about. They negotiated a set of terms of reference with an advisory committee that they struck that had a broad representation, and set up the commission and asked Munir and I if we would come in and lead the work.
And Munir, what have you in fact been asked to do?
Well, actually, the terms of reference for us were really clear, which is something which is quite desirable before you take on something. They asked us to look into 5 issues and provide our recommendations on how we can make improvements in those areas. Starting with how do you remove barriers to employment, how can we improve employment services, how can we make the system simpler, and how can we do it in a way that the system is viable in the long term. Finally, recognizing that social assistance is but one piece of the overall income security system. We were asked to look into the interaction between social assistance and other aspects of income security and see whether or not there are any links which are not working properly, and if indeed there aren't, then we were asked to make comments on that. We of course are not in a position to make recommendations on how to fix other parts of income security, but we can definitely comment on whether or not the linkages are working properly or not.
And your recommendations are due in June, is that right?
Yes, that's true.
In June, okay. Let's put some numbers. I know you guys know these numbers. I'm going to share these with our viewers right now because this will give a real lay of the land to our viewers on who receives social assistance. Michael, if you would, let's see these numbers. In the province of Ontario, there's almost 500,000 people who are on Ontario Works. That's one of the social assistance programs you've looked into. 54% are women, 46% are men. The average age, 36 years old. Almost half of them live in the Greater Toronto Area, with 6% in Ottawa and 6% in Northern Ontario. 58% of people on OW are singles, 31% single parents with children, just 14% newcomers, meaning they've been in Canada 5 years or less. About a third have completed high school, 23% have post-secondary education. And the cost of Ontario Works, according to the Auditor General, $2.4 billion. Let's try the other program now. Who receives social assistance? This is Ontario Disability Support Program that we just talked to Laura about. In that case, it's almost 400,000 people. That's almost 3% of the population. 44% of the people on ODSP have a physical disability, 38% a mental disability, 18% a developmental disability, and the average age of the recipient is 46 years old, a little over a third living in the Greater Toronto Area, 7% in Ottawa, 11% in the North. 77% are single, 9% single parents, just 2% newcomers, 30% have got their high school, 18% have got post-secondary, and the cost of ODSP, $3.5 billion. Okay, Francis, I know this is complicated as hell, but try to take us through these 2 different programs here. How do they work?
Well, Ontario Works is what we used to call general welfare in the province. And it's for people who are deemed able to return to the workforce. Now, that's a little bit speculative because as we've looked at it, there's about 25% who've been on Ontario Works for a long time. And as we've met many of these people, I'd say they're people who have perhaps hidden learning disabilities or even undiagnosed mental health issues.
So they should be on disability support.
Potentially, yeah. They're chronically stuck in social assistance. But for the other 75%, most of them make it back into the workforce within a year. So the program's actually working to support people to go back in. The problem is about 50% of them within the next year are back on social assistance. And one of the reasons for that is what Laura was talking about earlier in terms of the nature of the workforce now. We've got a lot more short-term contract positions, low wage, people cycle in and out. So it's not necessarily a failure of social assistance, it may be a failure of the job market. Ontario Disability Support Program was created and separated from the general welfare, and it's to support people who have a disability. Now, many of those people aspire to work, but one of the challenges that we found in terms of how the program's designed is that there's not a lot of effort put into helping people, supporting people in terms of developing a career plan and the training and the options to get back into work. It's also a problem in the job market as well in terms of discrimination and stigma. But those two programs basically support individuals and in some cases whole families with income supports and with some other supports like you heard Laura talk about access to drug, dental program, limited dental program, maybe vision care, and some one-time emergency things. For example, if someone is trying to get back into work and maybe needs to buy safety equipment or tools or something like that for a job. So there might be some additional one-time payments on top of that.
Gotcha. So Munir, you've been out traveling the province, listening to what people who use this system think about it. Give us an example of some of the stuff you're hearing.
Well, first of all, we have heard that the levels of benefits aren't adequate for the needs that people have. As an example, a single individual getting less than $8,000 a year, there isn't enough money for that person to live a decent life. So that's an issue that came up again and again. The second thing that we heard in spades, really clear, most of the people on social assistance actually want to work, and that includes people with disabilities. Their view is that employment support services aren't efficient in helping them out get the jobs that they're looking for.
I'm not sure members of the general public really believe that. I think most people think people prefer to be on social assistance because they don't have to do anything and they get the check coming in every month.
If there's one thing we have found without a shadow of doubt, it is that most of the people that we at least spoke to, they want to work. I think this life of receiving welfare, social assistance isn't a life which anybody would find desirable. There are challenges in finding work. There are challenges everywhere. There are challenges in the way the benefit system is structured, the challenges of employment services, the challenges in the labor market. So they face all of these challenges. And I have no doubt in my mind that if you can deal with at least some of those challenges, that these people in social assistance would be really happy to go out and work and earn a living.
There are some other challenges that lay outside of the direct employment barriers and or system barriers that have been built in, and it's things like you might need access to childcare, and there are waiting lists for childcare. Someone's life might be, really have cycled out of control with the loss of employment and maybe loss of housing and getting access to affordable housing. So sometimes the supports are the other kinds of social supports needed in community that need to be integrated and wrapped around an individual so that they can lift their heads up, stabilize their lives, and focus on hopefully building a life plan to get back into employment.
Now, when you were tasked with this, it was 2008, but was it before the meltdown?
We weren't tasked with this until last year.
Oh, till last year.
Yeah,
when the poverty strategy came out, though, that was pre-meltdown.
Yes,
now we're in the world of
yeah.
$16 billion deficits and Don Drummond's 300 and whatever it was, 52 recommendations. And you guys are being asked to kind of figure out how to make social assistance work in a world where we have less of everything going forward. Can you do this?
Well, we were given a challenge to develop a long-term vision for the province for social assistance reform, and we're holding on to that because it's critical that we have a roadmap of where we'd like to get to. Whether we can get there today in today's circumstances is a separate question for political decision making, and we understand the nature of the constraints that are on political decision making today, but we still need the long-term vision. The other thing that we need to recognize is the cost of not doing this reform, the cost to the healthcare system that's already under a lot of strain, to the criminal justice system. There are so many things that we can see a return on investment. Not alone, being the case if you get people back to work, that they're engaged in work and paying taxes and its revenues to government. So there's a big return on investment for doing some of the changes and reforms that we'll be commenting on. We think it's going to take a while to get there, though, given the current fiscal situation.
A while meaning what, 10, 15, 20 years?
I think it's a 10-year vision. We haven't got recommendations yet around a timing, but when I look at it, I think that they could do it in the next 3 to 5 years. All of the scope of things that we're talking about, just change management alone in a big system is going to take several years. And then to look at the injection of dollars that will be needed in some areas. So we've got to keep our eye on the fact that there is a fiscal reality, but we also have to give the province a long-term vision and something for us as a community to get our heads around and try and build a social consensus around. Because, as you said earlier when you're talking to Laura, sometimes the public has a particular view of the system and of people who are getting support from the system, and there's a lot of education that needs to be done and a lot of dialogue about what are the right outcomes that we want for our communities.
Sure. I know you focus on more than just the rates, but but we can't ignore the fact that the rates are important, how much social assistance people are receiving. And you talk about balancing 3 objectives in your most recent discussion paper. What are the objectives that you're talking about balancing and coming up with what the rate ought to be?
Well, let me go back to your last question, just take a minute to comment on that. There are many aspects of social assistance that need to be fixed. Some, one can argue, depend on money, others probably not. As an example, we talk about the importance of moving to an audit-based system. That may actually, in fact, save you money and improve your objectives better. So there are efficiencies that we can achieve without worrying about getting more money. So the way I think one may want to think about this is that you need to improve the program structure. And secondly, what level of money do you use that structure for is a separate issue.
Okay.
I think you can do the first and then wait for the long term to get the second part done. Now, on the question of the benefit structure itself, there are 3 objectives that I think every person we have talked to and we can talk to would agree that those are noble objectives. They all agree with them. One is fairness. If there are 2 individuals working side by side, one who is, say a full-time employee, no social assistance, the other on social assistance, working some hours, fairness obviously demands that someone working full-time without any social assistance should not be worse off than the person on social assistance. So
social assistance can't pay more than somebody who works for a living.
Of course.
Right, okay.
The second is, as we have mentioned already, there needs to be a reasonable, adequate level of benefits so people who are living on social assistance have a decent life, not a rich life, but a decent life. And the third, of course, when you compare a life in social assistance with that one of work, people should have the incentive to go and work because work pays. So those are 3 objectives. Everybody agrees with them. The challenge, it's a mathematical challenge. If you take 2 of those objectives and say, I'm going to achieve those 2, the third is totally out of your control. You can't fix it independently. And so there's a need for us to balance those 3 objectives, and that's where the challenge is. And the challenge is even more complex because this question of work pays. What does it mean? It means when someone on social assistance goes to find work, the incomes, the benefits, and other things that go with it, they're better outside than inside social assistance. But the labor market we are thinking about today, that labor market doesn't pay very much income for lower end jobs, and that plus the interaction of a host of other policies. And I'm sure you have heard about rising income inequality in Canada.
Of course.
That's the context in which we're trying to fix this. And in that context, achieving these 3 objectives is quite a complex
Well, let's
thing.
talk about that just for a second, because I assume you've heard from people who say, I'm afraid to leave social assistance and go get a low-paying job, because if I get off social assistance, I'm losing my free drug coverage, I'm losing my vision care, I'm losing, you know, the health benefits and so on and so forth. I mean, you guys, I guess, have got to get your head around what to do about that, right?
Well, that's exactly right. And, you know, when Munir says that everyone would agree with those three objectives, theoretically, yes. In the real world of what's happening in the labor market, I think what a number of people who live on social assistance feel is that, you know, they're getting pitted against low-wage workers, and that, you know, the question is, do they have to continue living in poverty, and do we keep rates low because of that? So that challenge is a real one, and as Munir said, it's made worse because of the growing nature of precarious employment. And we can comment on that, but someone else is going to have to take on that issue of growing income inequality. So when we look at this, we have to figure out, are there ways to ensure that we're actually meeting adequacy if someone can be in safe, clean housing and have nutritious food and seasonally appropriate clothing, the kinds of things that Laura talked about, and yet be able to transition into work and work pay. And so that's where some of these ideas come from about the segment of the workforce that's low wage and doesn't have benefits. You know, should we be doing something to make sure that everybody has access to a drug benefit plan and a dental plan?
But then we get back to a $16 billion deficit.
So the question is, and it was interesting because, you know, Laura raised this, should we let, you know, those employers off the hook? Well, in our paper, we asked the question, should we do this? And we also asked the question, who should pay for this? Is this a taxpayer, you know, footed bill? Or is this something that employers who currently aren't providing should be asked to pay into a pool? You know, are there other models? Are there co-pay models? So we have to examine how you would pay for that, and that's a big question right now.
And if job creation is your #1 priority, if you're the government of Ontario, do you want to be passing more regulations and putting more strictures on companies, forcing them, when they hire somebody, to, even if it's a low-income job, you know, you got to pay for some drug coverage here, you got to pay for this, you got to pay for that. I guess what I'm saying is here, this sounds impossible.
Well, it's a really
don't say
very
challenging.
Difficult. It's
it
a
sounds
very
impossible.
It's a difficult dilemma. So let me tell you very quickly a conversation I had with a really great CEO who said, "Look, there's some companies that we have that don't provide benefits, and if you force us to pay, we might move those across the border to where we don't have to pay." And I said, "But you think people should have access to these benefits?" "Absolutely, Francis." "Well, then do you think the government should pay?" "Yes, but you have to pay more taxes." "Well, there's other efficiencies it could pay for." "Well, okay, if the government did pay, what about the companies that you have who actually do provide benefits?" I said, "Well, I guess we'd stop to provide them because the government would pick it up." Even playing field. So there's a lot of issues at play there. The bottom line is we've got a change in the workforce. We used to have the majority of jobs would provide a living wage for people that they could support their families on, access to drug and health benefits. And if we're not going to do it as part of a universal system, we can't have a situation where we have a whole bunch of the population not having access to those basic health promotion, health prevention, because we'll pay for it through the tax dollar in the end.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that old commercial.
Yeah.
Okay, but Munir, how do you improve a person's employment outcomes within the system when the quality of jobs offered in the labor market is outside of your control? You've only got the opportunity to influence a small piece of this whole problem. Isn't that fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, the report, you know, makes it very clear that parts of the solution to the challenges we face are outside the system, and we are going to comment on those challenges, but parts are within the system. As Francis said, people with disabilities, you know, the mindset is they have disabilities, they can't do anything. We have heard to the contrary, that these people with disabilities, they actually want to work and they want to be considered as people with some abilities that they can contribute to the economy, to the society. Our employment services are not set up to achieve that objective. Our view, as we try to reflect in the paper, is that employment services should provide the same level of support to people with disabilities to find work as they do to other people. That's something we can, you know, fix within the system. Similarly, we have heard that 70% of the time of many caseworkers is spent on enforcing the rules of social assistance. If those individuals were given a different system to maintain the integrity of the system and spend a lot of their time helping people out in finding work, we can make an improvement.
Well, let me pick up on that, because I don't have to tell either one of you that one of the reasons Mike Harris got elected back in 1995 was he campaigned in that election by saying, In the late 1980s, when the economy of this province was booming, the number of welfare recipients was also going up. And it didn't make sense to him that in an economy which was theoretically lifting all boats, there should be more people requiring social assistance. He felt that there was just a ton of dishonesty in the system. And I want to know more, I guess, about this surveillance approach that you talk about in your report. Tell us about that.
Well, I guess at a basic level, we treat people who are in social assistance different than we treat the rest of the Canadian population. We expect that they're going to cheat. We suspect them of cheating every day, and we put rules upon rules to try and ensure that they're not, or catch them when they are. And, with dismal results, if you want to look at, return on investment of all the time and the dollars into that, there's only a small portion of the caseload that is ever found to be, cheating. So we have a whole system based on focusing on the handful of people that cheat as opposed to the majority of people and helping them build a better life.
So wasting a lot of resources and energy.
A lot of resources. Contrast that with the tax system, Revenue Canada. All of us are expected to pay taxes, and we all know somebody who cheats on their taxes, but there are a handful of people who cheat versus the people who abide by the laws and who do what they're supposed to do. We have a system where we assess where someone may be at risk or where it looks like they should be investigated, and we audit them, and it can be a real terrible time if you're audited and you're found out, and there are penalties. That's a surveillance system.
So you should
as
go to that,
opposed
is
to
that what
money.
you're saying?
Something along those lines is what we're asking people to comment on. A shift in the focus. We believe that there has to be accountability. We believe that people shouldn't cheat, and if they cheat, they should be prosecuted, or they should be fined, penalized for cheating. But the whole system shouldn't be geared towards that enforcement. It should be geared towards helping people build a better life and helping them get off social assistance and in better economic circumstances. That's to the benefit of all of us in our communities.
So what happens now? You've got 2 reports out there. People have been commenting on them. You've got till June to come up with recommendations. What are you going to be spending your next 5 months or so doing?
Well, between now and June, our job basically is to sit down and go through all of the issues that are on the table and getting information, evidence, wherever we can find it, commentary from stakeholders. We're going to start making a decision on where the report is going to go, and then there's of course the question of writing it up. So between now and June, make decisions, write it up, and give it to the government.
Has anybody suggested, Huey Segal was here not too long ago, the Conservative senator, talking about he's only been championing the idea of a guaranteed annual income for about 30 years, maybe longer. Is that on your potential agenda?
Let me make an observation first, and then if you have time, we can talk about it. Guaranteed annual income and the reform of social assistance, they're complementary and not substitutes. There are issues that the guaranteed annual income is trying to solve. I think they are good objectives, and one can spend time and trying to make progress on that front. But there are issues that we are trying to solve.
We got 2 minutes left here, and I just want to.
They're not solved as part of guaranteed annual income.
His idea is you don't need any of this surveillance, you don't need this whole system, you don't need all this bureaucracy, you don't need any of this if you give everybody a guaranteed annual income, and then of course for those who make above a certain amount, you just tax it back, and for those who need it, they've got it. Is that an idea?
Take, for example, the question of a person with disability. Are you going to provide him more support because of that disability, both inside social assistance and outside? That's an issue that doesn't handle. What should be the level of guaranteed annual income? Is it 5,000, 8,000, 15,000? That doesn't solve that problem either. So those are the kinds of issues we are focused upon.
Back to what I said earlier. This is impossible. This is just impossible.
Always up for the challenge, though.
You are?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll do our very best to make progress on this front.
I'm sure you will.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.